We'll speak now to Marco Fernandes, researcher with the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and co-editor of Dongsheng News. Welcome. Military supplies to Ukraine have made the U.S. and the EU feel the economic strain, with increasing discontent in Europe over government policy on how the Ukraine conflict is developing. How do you see this mood developing, and what consequences could it have for Western hegemony?
Well, hello, Farella. Thanks for having me here. So I think, first of all, the mood, especially in the global south, is getting worse by the hour. You saw that recently President Macron from France said he was shocked about how much the West is losing credibility in the global south. But then even the president comes a few weeks later and do that absurd behavior with the president of DRC, which he was criticizing arrogantly in front of the TV cameras. So I think this is also expression of the hubris of the West at this point, of course, led by the United States. So I don't think most of the countries in the global south right now, they are not looking to US or Europe as a trustable partner for the next years.
You mentioned this changing relationship, but also Russia has proven resistant to Western sanctions. Last year, the country's GDP only shrunk by 2.2%, and it's actually predicted to grow this year. How do you explain this economic durability in spite of the sanctions?
Well, this is basically because Russia is a huge producer of manufacturing, also of food, fertilizers, and of course, energy. So, U.S. is already used to devastate countries with sanctions, like they're doing with Cuba for 60 years, with Venezuela, with Iran, and many other countries, Zimbabwe in Africa. But these countries had economies that are not so strong or are not so diversified with strategic resources as Russia has. So, of course, this tactic of, and by the way, Russia has no other nation in history had so many sanctions from US and Europe as Russia has now. But of course, having this huge economic base and strategic resources for the whole world, of course, you cannot crush a country with the sanctions.
Right. So Russia has a lot more going for it than, say, some countries in the global south. But despite the unprecedented amount of sanctions that's been put on Russia and the political pressure coming from the West, many countries, specifically China and India among them, are willing to continue trading with Moscow. What's behind their decision?
Well, I think, first of all, of course, there is an economic pragmatic reason. Countries need natural resources. Take the case of India, for instance. India now is the largest buyer of Russian oil. And China increased also a lot the purchase of oil, gas, and other resources. But I don't think it's only economic pragmatic reason. Of course, I think there's also political reasons, because more and more countries like India, who, by the way, used to be very close to the United States in the last decades, I would say, but of course being also very close to Russia. But countries like India, like China, like even Brazil, South Africa, they are part of BRICS together. And Russia is also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with many other important countries of the region, as Pakistan, as Iran now is coming, even Turkey. NATO member now is already mentioning that wants to also to join Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I think there is a big awareness, a growing awareness in the countries of the global south that we need to reinforce and organize even better these regional platforms, but also global platforms, the global south, because this is the only way to deal with the West, and especially U.S., with its increasing aggressiveness against so many countries in the world.
Right. It seems like what you're mentioning is this emerging multipolarity, and BRICS countries are in the process of developing alternatives to the dominance of the U.S. dollar in global markets. What changes do you think could occur in the international economy with this de-dollarization?
Well, first of all, it's good to mention that right now the BRICS countries, they are studying a mechanism to implement a mechanism that could bypass the dollar. Is what the Russians called first the R5 project, because the 5 currencies of the BRICS countries starts with R. So that's an interesting coincidence. But getting to your point, I think, of course, we know that the dollar is the real mass weapon of mass destruction beyond, of course, the nuclear bombs. That U.S. has the power also to choke economies around the world, simply, for instance, excluding countries from SWIFT, that they did with so many countries, including Russia. Also blocking the access of dollars, as they do with Venezuela and Cuba, for instance, and even Afghanistan, or even worse, they could just steal the international reserves of the countries like they did with Russia, more than $300 billion, as everybody knows, but also did with Afghanistan, also with Venezuela. So this gives the dollar gives U.S. a huge power. But also you have to remember, when countries run out of the dollar, they have to go talk to IMF and beg to IMF to have more dollars. But IMF comes again with some of the package of measures, austerity measures, that also devastate states and whole nations. So there's lots of different ways, different tools that U.S. have through the dollar to bully other countries. So that's why so many countries right now also are starting to create alternatives. I mean, China, of course, is a leading force on that, but many other countries are already doing directly, and some of those regional platforms as BRICS, or even Brazil and Argentina in South America right now, they already creating mechanisms to bypass the dollar. This is a trend. Of course, dollar will be still the hegemonic currency for many years, but we need to create alternatives, and this is what the countries are doing.
It's clear changes are ahead. Marco Fernandes, researcher with the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and co-editor of Dongsheng News. Thank you.
Thank you.